Well, we're here at the Salzburg Seminar, and the title of this session is Breaking the Glass Ceiling, Women in Business and Politics. Why are we still talking about this so long after the conversation began?
Well, we're talking about it because we haven't really broken the glass ceiling. I sometimes say that we've cracked the glass ceiling, but we haven't broken it. And certainly looking at it from the perspective of United States statistics, which is the country I come from, we've actually stalled as far as progress is concerned. Progress for women moving into the top of corporations, either on their boards of directors or as the top earners or the people who make the decisions. And that's also true in politics, that we're really very slow in terms of expanding. There's a lot of research around the world that shows that if there's 30% women, or something like a third, on any kind of a board or a political party, that it makes a big difference in what the outcomes are. Mm-hmm. And we're nowhere near that. In fact, in terms of politics, in our Congress, it's 16% women, and that's the highest it's ever been in our history as a country. And then in business, it's even less than that. Depending on which thing you look at, we're down into the single digits in terms of women holding positions of power. So there's a lot of people who'd like us to forget this discussion, but we're not there yet, and we can't forget it.
Well, in the old days, people used to talk about the pipeline theory, that if you just get enough women into the lower levels of the pipeline, they'd come out on top at the end. Now, that hasn't proven to be right, has it?
No, it hasn't. In fact, a lot of us believed in the pipeline theory. And I say this is one of the myths that needs to be exploded, because in fact, if the pipeline theory worked, then, for example, if you started into business and you moved up in the company, you wouldn't find a glass ceiling. You would find that your opportunities would be based on your skill and your talent and being able to move ahead. And I have become personally extremely convinced that unless we develop a real focus on increasing women in leadership, that in fact that pipeline theory isn't going to work. But just one more point I want to add about that. And that is, if you look at what women have done to prepare themselves for leadership, it's a different picture altogether. The majority of women, the majority of college graduates in the United States are women. It's about to cross over at the PhD level, where there'll be more women PhD graduates than men graduates. And if you look all the way through the kinds of preparation, women have done their share to prepare. So the question is, if the pipeline isn't going to be open, what do we need to do? Because we have all this talent that is not being utilized in our society.
Mm-hmm. And is it male resistance that's causing this, or is it other factors?
I actually think there's a lot of factors. I think, first of all, that it is not sexism in the same way we used to think about it in the beginning of the women's movement. I think now it is much more subtle than that. And I think that the kinds of barriers that we see are, first of all, people hiring people who look just like themselves. And if you have all men and they are very comfortable there, they're likely to do that. Secondly, not looking at what women really do add as a value added. And that's the piece that I think is the newest argument to make. What does shared leadership do? If you had more women, does it make any difference?
Exactly. So what difference would it make to corporations? And then we'll talk about politics. What difference would it make if there were more women in politics? But first, corporations.
First, corporations. Well, actually, there's a lot of very good research by Catalyst, which is a research organization in New York City. And they're showing that the companies in the Fortune 500, which are, of course, the largest ones, those companies that have more women in management and more women on the board return 34% more in profits than the companies in the Fortune 500 who don't have many women in the top. So, I mean, if you're looking at performance, then this should be a very powerful argument. And the reason that the performance increases is that women bring different experience and different skills on managing people, developing teams, creating relationships and partnerships, and businesses to be successful need that a great deal. So in business, there's already some very clear research that if you want to succeed, you want to have more women at the top and not less women.
And politics?
Well, politics is interesting also. The group that's done most of the research is the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers University. And what they show is women, regardless of political party, when they go into office, they bring an agenda of issues which have been neglected. Not necessarily just women's issues. They weren't seen to be important enough issues, however, to be solved. What do we do about a minimum wage? Well, it is true that most minimum wage workers in the United States are women, but this hasn't been a women's issue. This is an employment issue. Other issues like what do we do about early childhood education? You know, universal kindergarten, preschool programs. It's not exactly a women's issue, but it was a neglected issue until we began to get women in office, and that's where the agenda changes.
The points you made actually, I think, have been true all over the world. The World Bank, the United Nations, and the International Monetary Fund has done research that proves that when you invest in women, the entire economy benefits, I believe. Isn't that correct?
That certainly is very true. And The Economist last year, which is, you know, sort of like the financial Bible, had a 3-piece article that said if you really want to succeed and grow economies, forget India, forget China, forget the internet, bet on women.
Oh, really? That's a great...
It's a great quote, and it was a great article. And in fact, I think that hasn't yet infused thinking in the United States. But I do see other countries being very concerned about the empowerment of women, representing new talent to add to their economy or to their politics, and that can make a decided difference in moving a country forward.
So is that why it makes sense to link business and politics in the advancement of women? Because I think some people would say, why are you doing that?
Well, that's one reason. I certainly would say that's one reason. But a second reason is that if women who have power politically and women who have power in business can connect up, they can be incredibly mutually supportive of moving the whole agenda forward of women's leadership. And I have been intrigued how seldom women in business and women in politics have actually been able to work together. And yet I know that men in business and men in politics, at least in our country, have overlapping relationships all of the time for their mutual benefit.
Are there other myths you would like to explode here?
Well, there are several myths that I would like to explode. The pipeline one is actually my favorite because, in fact, that is what so many people believe. But I also think that there's the myth that there's no difference between women and men. And I have tried to bring out a little bit of the research. It seems to me that this is the only arena in which experience somehow doesn't count. And so unless we actually get the benefit of both, we're missing some of the real possibilities for creativity and innovation and so forth. So I do think there is a difference. I think it's a positive difference. And that's why I talk about shared leadership, women and men together to make a different future for the country and for the world. I think women will benefit from that new future. But I think that we can be too narrow if we think that the only thing we're building is a better life for women or a better life for women and children. I think shared leadership can lead to a better economy, more democratic societies, and advancement because we're using all the talent that's there.
Well, you've cited some very powerful research and facts and other statements. How do you see this playing out in the next 10 years? Do you think we'll still be having the same conversation?
I think we're growing generations of women and girls with different kinds of expectations. And my hope is that will be the demand side. We have a supply side, and that will be part of the demand side so that it won't be the same conversation in 10 years.
That's wonderful. I hope you're right.
I hope so, too.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Okay, thank you.